My family skipped my school graduation to celebrate my sister's engagement, so I changed my name and left. This morning, they're desperately calling me. I can still recall the precise tint of blue the sky was that morning. It's cloudless, dazzling, and almost mockingly flawless. On June 12th, I was meant to go across a stage and earn my medical degree after 8 grueling years of undergraduate and medical school combined. My entire family had known about this day for months, but they preferred to forget. My name was Jessica Taylor Walker back then. 29 years old, top 10% of my class at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, and so ignorant that I thought blood meant anything. I reserved 15 tickets for my family in the auditorium. 15. My parents' names are Robert and Karen, my older brother Daniel and his wife Natalie, my younger sister Emily, my grandmother Margaret, my Aunt Carol and Uncle Paul, my cousins Nathan and Lily, and 2 more seats because I honestly assumed someone could wish to bring a buddy or partner I wasn't aware of. The ceremony commenced at 10 a.m. By 9:30, I was standing outside the auditorium in full regalia, my phone placed against my ear, listening to it ring and ring. Nobody responded. Not my mother, father, Daniel, or Emily. I phoned 8 times total. 8 times, I received automated voicemail greetings from people who were meant to love me unconditionally. Dr. Whitfield, my faculty supervisor, discovered me crying in the restroom 15 minutes before I was meant to line up with my cohort. "Jessica, what is wrong?" she inquired, her voice quiet and concerned. I could not even form words. I just showed her my phone, the call log and the desperate text message I'd written that had gone unanswered. She handed me tissues and said something that would stay with me for years. "The folks who show up for you are your true family. Sometimes this has nothing to do with genetics." I stepped across the stage alone. When they called my name and announced that I had graduated with honors and will begin my residency in general surgery at Massachusetts General Hospital, there was no outburst of shouts from a designated family area, only polite applause from strangers and the hollow echo of my own footsteps. The dean shook my hand and leaned forward slightly. "Congratulations, Dr. Walker. You should be quite proud." I was able to smile, nod, and go through the motions like someone who hadn't just been devastated by her own family. Muscle memory transported me across the stage and back to my seat, where I remained for the next 2 hours of the ceremony, feeling nothing at all. As we poured out of the theater, Sophie, a classmate I barely knew who had been in my anatomy lab 4 years before, observed my hollow countenance. "Hey, are you all right? You look like you saw a ghost. This is a family emergency." I lied because the truth was too humiliating to say out loud. They could not make it. Sophie's expression softened with sympathy. "That is dreadful. Would you like to come to lunch with my family? My grandma prepared far too much food, and she will be offended if we don't bring more guests." The kindness of a nearby stranger, expressed so casually, nearly broke me. I rejected as gently as possible, stating a need to check on matters at home. But that moment stayed with me for years after. The proof that basic human decency existed in the world, even if it did not make its way into my immediate household. Before going to Bethesda, I sat in the parking garage for exactly 5 minutes, allowing myself to come apart. I sobbed until my chest hurt and my eyes swelled almost shut. Then I adjusted my cosmetics in the rearview mirror, smoothed my doctorate hood, and drove into an encounter that I knew would change everything. The issue about denial is that it takes ongoing upkeep. Every day you must make a conscious decision not to perceive the patterns that define you. Driving down those familiar streets, past monuments from a life spent always in someone else's shadow, I felt my denial crumble like ice in spring. There was the elementary school where I won the spelling bee in 4th grade, and my mother had unintentionally thrown away the trophy during a cleaning spree. Emily had a cry about her first boyfriend dumping her 2 streets away from the orthodontist's clinic where I had my braces off the same day, thus my milestone went completely unnoticed. The community center where I played a Chopin nocturne at the age of 12 had been practicing for 6 months, while my parents texted in the audience about Emily's most recent conflict with her friend group. 26 years as an afterthought. 26 years of accepting small amounts of attention and fooling myself they were feasts. 26 years of feeling that if I just worked hard enough, excelled enough, and proved myself enough, someone would eventually notice me. After then, my classmates were surrounded by family holding flowers and balloons. Marcus Chen, who had barely scraped by academically, had 14 people supporting him. 14. His grandmother flew in from Taiwan. Meanwhile, I stood by myself near the exit, refreshing my phone and hoping for a logical explanation. The explanation arrived 2 hours later when I finally traveled the 40 minutes to my folks' house in Bethesda. I found these in the backyard. All of them. Everyone I had invited to my graduation was present, gathering around a decorated table to celebrate my sister Emily's engagement to her boyfriend Chris. An engagement that had reportedly occurred the night before. An engagement that somehow overshadowed the most significant academic success of my life. Jessica. My mother noticed me first, her champagne glass raised mid-toast. "You're here. Come and celebrate with us. Emily is getting married." I stood at the edge of the terrace, still in my graduation regalia because I hadn't gone home to change. The PhD hood on my shoulders felt like a costume, silly and out of place at the unplanned engagement party that had taken over my day. My graduation was today. The sentences came out flat and impersonal. I saw the knowledge flash across various faces. My father's countenance altered almost subtly before returning to neutral. Daniel took a long drink of his beer. Emily literally rolled her eyes. "Oh, honey." My mother placed down her glass and approached me with that patronizing smile I knew so well. "We were about to call you. Chris unexpectedly proposed last night, and Emily wanted everyone to join her this morning to celebrate. We thought you'd understand. Graduation ceremonies are always long and boring, and you didn't really need us there. You're always so independent." I gazed around at my family, at the streamers and cake in the champagne bottles, and at my grandma, who averted my gaze. At my Aunt Carol, who suddenly became very interested in her manicure, and at Daniel, who shrugged when I caught his stare, as if to say, "What did you expect?" And the truth was, some part of me had expected exactly this because Emily had taken precedence before. This wasn't even the 100th time. When I was 14, I won the state science fair, and we celebrated by attending Emily's dancing recital. When I was admitted to Johns Hopkins with a full scholarship, my parents had Emily's Sweet 16 party the same weekend and promised me we'd celebrate my admission later. Later never arrived. Emily announced that she was changing her major for the third time after I scored in the 98th percentile on the MCAT. That apparently dominated dinner conversation for several weeks. My entire life, I've been the responsible one. The overachiever. The daughter who never made trouble. And throughout my entire life that meant I was invisible. Emily was dramatic, demanding, and depleted every room's air supply. My parents had spent so many years regulating her moods and attending to her whims that they had completely forgotten I existed. But there on that terrace, watching my family toast Emily's engagement while I wore the tangible evidence of 8 years of sacrifice around my neck, something inside me finally snapped. "You're right," I replied gently. "I am independent. Thank you for reminding me." I turned around and walked back to my car. My mother called after me. Something about being dramatic and destroying Emily's particular occasion, but I didn't give up. I did not glance back. I headed straight to the courthouse the next morning. The procedure of legally changing your name is surprisingly straightforward. Forms, costs, a court date, and a judge who hardly glanced up from his paperwork before granting my petition. Jessica and Taylor disappeared within 5 weeks. In her place stood Dr. Jessica and Walker, a name I had purposefully chosen. Walker is someone who walks away and continues to move. I had previously planned on relocating to Boston for my residency. That move has now become a complete reinvention. I changed my phone number, erased all social media accounts, sent my mail to a P.O. box, and left no forwarding address. I notified only one person from my previous life about the change. Dr. Whitfield, who had been more like a mother to me in 4 years than Karen Taylor had been in 29. "Are you certain about this?" she inquired as I described my decision. "They didn't notice me when I was there. Let's see how long it takes them to discover I've left." The answer was 2 months. In August I received an email at my professional address, just as my emergency medicine residency was taking up all of my waking hours. The sender was Daniel, and the message was brief. "Mom says you aren't returning her calls. She is upset. Could you please apologize so we can move on? Emily's wedding planning is already stressful enough, without your drama." I removed it without replying. The next communication arrived in October. My father left a voicemail on the hospital's general line. "Jessica, the silent treatment is ridiculous. Your mother is sick and frightened. You must call home quickly." I had the administrative assistant advise him that no one named Jessica Taylor worked at the hospital. It was not even a falsehood. By December my former existence seemed like a fever dream. I was Dr. Walker, now a resident who worked 90-hour weeks, saved lives and returned home to a little apartment in Cambridge where no one's needs came before mine. I spent Christmas with 3 other inmates who had similar complex familial backgrounds. We ate Thai food, watched bad movies, and laughed until our sides ached. It was the most enjoyable holiday I'd ever had. Marilyn's silence lasted over 1.5 years. I created a totally new existence at that time. Friends who chose me not out of obligation, but because they truly loved my company. A career that challenged me academically while also fulfilling me emotionally. A feeling of self that was not defined by being the responsible daughter, the neglected sister, or the family afterthought. And then, on a random Tuesday in March during my 3rd year of residency, my grandma Margaret died. I discovered out through a Google alert I set up years ago as a passive method to see if anyone from my previous life had tried to contact me. The obituary was brief, identifying survivors including granddaughters, Emily Taylor Mitchell and Jessica Taylor. Except Jessica Taylor no longer lived, and no one in my family had attempted to inform me. I pondered attending the funeral. For over an hour, I sat with that option, considering it from all sides. My grandmother had been good to me in a gentle way. She'd given me money for textbooks when I first started medical school, which she begged me not to tell my parents about. She came to my white coat ceremony when no one else did. But she had also been present that day. She'd been at Emily's engagement party, sitting in a chair that should have been reserved for my graduation. She had made a decision, just like everyone else. I did not go. 2 weeks after the funeral, a private investigator arrived at Massachusetts General, inquiring about Dr. Jessica Taylor. I know this because my colleague, Dr. Keisha Warren, addressed it at lunch, laughing about how some unfortunate woman's family had allegedly hired a private investigator to track her down. Isn't that wild? Kesha explained, biting at her food. Imagine being so distant that your family must engage a specialist to locate you. Wild? I agreed, and secretly started taking extra safeguards with my sensitive information. The PI was unable to locate Dr. Jessica Walker. The investigator had been checking medical licensing databases and alumni records under my previous identity, never considering cross-referencing physical descriptors or graduation years with newly licensed physicians. Years had passed before my parents decided to take a different strategy, and the trail had gone cold. My parents ultimately found me 8 months later, thanks to a medical journal article that included my name and hospital affiliation. They arrived unannounced on a Saturday afternoon, standing in the lobby of my apartment building as I returned after a 12-hour shift. My mother had changed dramatically in the 3 years since I last saw her. Grace's pinched lines defined her mouth. My father appeared smaller, somehow weakened. For a brief moment, I felt a twist in my chest that could have been sympathy. My mother responded, "Your daughter wouldn't let us down," with that usual accusatory tone in her voice. "We've waited for 2 hours." "Good day, Dorman." Karen flinched, like if I had hit her. "Jessica, this has lasted long enough. We are your parents. You can't simply disappear." "Actually, I can. It's Dr. Walker now." My father's cheeks turned red. "What kind of nonsense is this? Your name is Taylor." "Our name? Not anymore. I had it legally altered soon after graduating. You remember when I graduated, right? The one you passed up in favor of an engagement party." The silence that followed was almost comforting. Almost. Mostly, I felt exhausted. The tiredness of a long shift was exacerbated by the emotional strain of confronting a history I had worked so hard to leave behind. "We did not skip it," my mother finally admitted. "We just had a disagreement. Emily needed us that day, so we made a judgment call. Jessica, you have always been so self-sufficient. We knew you would be okay." "Dr. Walker," I corrected automatically. "And you're correct. I was okay. I'm fine. Better than great, actually, now that I'm not continuously forgotten by those who are supposed to adore me." "We love you," my father said, though he couldn't quite meet my gaze. "You are our daughter. I was your daughter for 29 years. I was your daughter who got straight A's and never got into trouble, and I worked 3 jobs to help pay for my living expenses because you spent my college money on Emily's car after she damaged it for the 2nd time. I was your daughter, sitting in waiting rooms while you went to Emily's therapy appointments, college visits, and everything else. I was your daughter, and I saw you consistently chose her in every situation." My voice remained steady throughout the speech. I'd rehearsed it enough times in my thoughts during sleepless nights, long commutes, and quiet moments when the past creeped up on me unexpectedly. "That is not fair," my mother protested. "Emily struggled. She needed additional help. You were always quite capable. And how was I expected to be something else? What would have occurred if I had struggled? If I had required additional help, would you have suddenly obtained the ability to see me? Or would you have sent me to my room while you handled Emily's current crisis? Neither of them had an answer to it. I wanted you at my graduation, I said, my voice lowering. Not because I wanted approval, or because I lacked the independence to manage things on my own. I wanted you to be there because it was important to me, and I assumed you cared about me. But I did not. I never did. And the sooner I accepted this, the sooner I could stop hoping for something that would never happen. My mother began crying. Big dramatic tears that made me think of Emily. My father wrapped his arm around her and murmured reassurance. And I watched as they formed a unit that had never included me. We want you to come home, my father finally said. For Easter. Emily is pregnant and she wants the whole family there. I had a giggle. I couldn't help it. After all, even after arriving unannounced and facing me with 3 years of unresolved rage, their pitch was still about Emily. Tell Emily congratulations, and remind her that she will have to celebrate without me, just as I did at my graduation. My mother grabbed my arm as I attempted to walk past her. Her hold was shockingly powerful, urgent in a way I hadn't seen from her before. Jess, please. We are your parents? Doesn't that mean something to you? I gazed down at her hand on my arm, her manicured nails, and the 35-year-old wedding band. At the tangible embodiment of a connection I had spent my entire life attempting to feel. It meant everything to me, I admitted humbly. That was the problem. It meant everything to me, but nearly nothing to you. My father took a step forward, positioning himself between my mother and me in the familiar peacekeeping stance I was used to. Let us all calm down. We can discuss this like adults. We are not going to discuss anything. You had 29 years to talk to me, see me, and treat me as if I were even somewhat as important as Emily. You chose not to, and I'm not going to pretend it's okay anymore. This is awful, my mother muttered, tears flowing down her cheeks. You are being purposely unkind. The charge landed exactly where she intended, in the vulnerable spot where my guilt resided. I wavered for a second. These were my parents. They had raised me, fed me, and kept a roof over my head. Wasn't that worth something? Didn't I owe them basic respect, consideration, and forgiveness? But then I remembered sitting alone in that auditorium, the silence where their cheers should have been, and every recital, awards ceremony, and milestone they'd missed. Every time they'd chosen Emily's mess over my accomplishments, every time I'd shrunk myself to avoid being a burden, I responded. You taught me that being cruel to someone meant not showing up for them when it mattered, which I learned from experts. I walked past them, used my keycard to access the elevator, and rode up to my apartment alone. Through the lobby window, I could see my mother gesticulating wildly and my father attempting to calm her down. Neither of them looked up at the building, trying to figure out which window might be mine. They were never very good at looking for me. Spring turned to summer, and my residency's relentless demands continued. I finished my 5th year at the top of my cohort, and accepted a fellowship in trauma and critical care surgery at Boston Medical Center. My career was flourishing in ways I'd never imagined, and my personal life was flourishing as well. I've been dating a medical device engineer named Ethan for about a year, a kind and thoughtful man who listened to me and showed up when he said he would. After a lifetime of being overlooked, Ethan's consistent attention felt revolutionary. He proposed on a hiking trail in New Hampshire, pulling out a ring at the summit of Mount Lafayette while I was sweating through my shirt and desperately needed water. Your timing is terrible, I told him, laughing through tears. That's why I brought champagne. He produced a tiny bottle from his backpack, only slightly warm from the trip. I thought if we're going to do this, we should start how we mean to continue on. Imperfect, but trying. That October, we married in a short ceremony at a winery near Boston. I invited 25 people, all of whom were friends I'd made since becoming Dr. Walker. Ethan's parents flew in from California, and his mother hugged me so hard I thought my ribs might crack. Thank you for making our son so happy, she whispered. I didn't invite anyone from Maryland. Emily learned about my wedding through Facebook. One of Ethan's cousins had tagged a photo from the reception, and by some algorithmic coincidence it had appeared on my sister's feed despite our lack of connection. The email she sent was classic Emily, equal parts victimhood and accusation. I can't believe you got married without telling us. Mom cried for 3 days. Dad barely speaks anymore. You've torn this family apart, Jessica, and for what? Because we missed one graduation years ago. Normal people forgive and move on. You need serious psychological help if you're still holding on to something so petty. I read the email twice and archived it without responding because there was nothing to say. Ethan discovered me in our home office that night, staring at my laptop screen. Emily would never understand that she was the symptom, not the disease. The true issue was a family system that had taught me from birth that my needs were unimportant, that my accomplishments were an inconvenience, and that my presence was optional. Is everything okay? My sister sent an email about the wedding and she's upset we didn't invite them. He sat beside me, taking my hand. Do you want to talk about it? Not really. I just find it fascinating that even now, after everything, she still thinks this is about one graduation. She doesn't see the pattern, and neither do they. Would it matter if they did? I pondered the question. If my parents showed up tomorrow with genuine remorse, acknowledging decades of neglect, would it make a difference? Probably not. I admit it. The damage has been done, and my life is better now than it was when they were there. That sounds harsh, but it's true. Ethan squeezed my hand. Then maybe focus on that. The life you've built. The people who actually show up for you. He was right. He usually was. 2 more years passed, and I finished my fellowship and accepted an attending position in trauma surgery at Brigham and Women's Hospital. Ethan's company went public, making us unexpectedly wealthy in a way that still felt surreal. We bought a house in Brooklyn with a garden in the home office and a spare bedroom that we started referring to as the future nursery. On a Thursday in November, the letter arrived on official stationery from a law firm in Bethesda. My father had died of a sudden and massive heart attack in the parking lot of a grocery store. He was 67. The letter, addressed to Dr. Jessica Walker in my hospital's administrative office, was from Robert Taylor's attorney, informing me that I had been mentioned in his will and requested that I attend the reading. I sat with that letter for quite some time. My father and I had never been close, even before the estrangement. He was a quiet man, overshadowed by my mother's personality and overwhelmed by Emily's demands. In my memories, he existed mostly in the background, a presence rather than a participant. He hadn't actively hurt me the way my mother had, but his passive acceptance of my invisibility was its own kind of wound. And now he was gone, and I would never have the chance to confront him, to demand answers, to force him to see what his silence had caused. An hour later, Ethan found me crying in the garden. The letter crumpled in my fist. Your father? I nodded, unable to speak. Do you want to go to the funeral? No. I said hoarsely but certain. I don't want to see any of them. I don't want to pretend to mourn with people who never mourn my absence. What about the will reading gave me pause. I'm not sure. I wasn't expecting to be included. We've been estranged for 5 years. Perhaps he felt bad, and this was his way of making up. Making amends would have required courage he lacked, but leaving something in a will, a gesture that couldn't be contested or argued with, that took only the courage of knowing he wouldn't be alive to face the consequences, sounded just like Robert Taylor. The will reading took place 2 weeks later in a conference room that smelled like old coffee and new carpet. I arrived early, deliberately, and sat in a corner seat with a view of the door. My mother entered first, leaning heavily on Daniel's arm. She looked terrible, hollowed out by grief in a way that made her appear decades older. Emily came next, visibly pregnant and supported by her husband Chris. The attorney cleared his throat. Now that everyone is present, we can begin. My mother's head swiveled, scanning the room. Her eyes found me, and her face went through a complicated series of expressions. None of them noticed me right away because they weren't looking for me. Shock, hope, anger, grief. Jessica. Dr. Walker, I corrected for what felt like the 1,000th time. You came. She started toward me, arms outstretched, and I held up a hand to stop her. I came for the reading. Nothing else. The attorney intervened smoothly, directing everyone to their seats, and what happened next was exactly what I expected. Yep. My mother got the house and the most of the inheritance. Daniel got my father's car collection and some investment accounts. Emily got jewelry, furnishings, and a significant monetary gift to help with the new baby. And then the attorney turned to me. I left the Rehoboth Beach house and its contents, along with the attached letter, to be read privately by my daughter Jessica. The silence that followed was absolute, even Emily's perpetual motion stilled. My mother's mouth opened and closed several times before she managed to speak. That's impossible. Robert wouldn't. That house was supposed to go to the grandchildren, and we discussed it. Mrs. Taylor, the will is quite clear. The Rehoboth property has been bequeathed to Dr. Jessica Walker, formerly Jessica Taylor, with no conditions or restrictions. I remember the beach house from my childhood, before Emily's needs consumed everything. When my father would take me there alone and we'd fish off the pier in companionable silence. The attorney handed me a sealed envelope, cream-colored and heavy with my father's handwriting spelled out on the front. Both names, Jessica Taylor Walker. I tucked it into my purse without opening it. I hadn't thought about those weekends since I was about 8 years old, around the time Emily began her first round of therapy. She abandoned this family, she didn't come to Dad's funeral, and she doesn't deserve anything. You're right. I stood up, slinging my purse over my shoulder. I didn't come to Dad's funeral, just like none of you came to my graduation, wedding, or anything else. I walked out of the conference room without looking back, hearing Emily's outraged protests and my mother's weeping in grand, slow, placating murmurs behind me. The difference was that I had stopped expecting you to show up a long time ago, but you still had expectations of me, which appears to be a personal issue. The sounds of a family I no longer belonged to, dealing with consequences I no longer had to manage. I read the letter in my car parked in the law firm's lot because I couldn't wait to get home. Jessica, it began. If you're reading this, I'm gone. And I never found the courage to say these things to your face. That's the story of my life, I suppose. I knew what your mother was doing, how she prioritized Emily, how she made you invisible, and I told myself I was helping by not making waves, keeping the peace, and letting things slide. But I wasn't. I was abandoning you just as surely as if I'd walked out the door. I wanted to leave on the day of your graduation. I had planned to go that morning, but your mother was so certain that Emily needed us, and I told myself you'd understand, because you always did. That was the trouble, wasn't it? You understood too much, forgave too easily, and expected too little. The beach house is yours because those weekends were the only times I ever felt like I was being a true father to you. I should have fought harder to keep them, and I should have fought harder for you in general, but I didn't. Now all I can do is leave you with a building full of memories and a letter full of inadequate apologies. I don't expect your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that I saw you even when it appeared that I didn't, that I was proud of you even when I failed to show it, and that I loved you even when my actions suggested otherwise. Be happy, Jessica, and build a life full of people who show up for you. You deserve nothing less, Dad. I sat in that parking lot for a long time, crying in a way I hadn't allowed myself to cry in years. The letter changed nothing. My father was still gone, my family was still broken, and no amount of apologies could undo decades of neglect. But knowing he had seen me, knowing that somewhere beneath all of his passivity and fear, he had understood exactly what was going on and felt guilty about it, was meaningful. It was never enough, but it was something. The beach home became my sanctuary, and Ethan and I spent weekends there, painstakingly remodeling it, replacing terrible memories with new ones. We removed the faded wallpaper from the master bedroom and painted it a beautiful sage green. We replaced the worn deck boards and added comfortable outdoor furniture where I could sit with my morning coffee and watch the ocean shift through its moods. One afternoon, while clearing out the garage, I discovered a box of old photographs my father had kept hidden behind rusted gardening equipment. The majority of the photos were from before I was born, and they showed my parents as young and hopeful, unburdened by the family they would eventually create. But near the bottom, I discovered a small envelope containing pictures from those fishing weekends we'd shared, just the two of us. One showed me at 7 years old, holding up a tiny flounder with a triumphant expression, and another showed me at 8, asleep in a deck chair with a book fallen across my chest. A third photograph showed my father and me on the pier at sunset, silhouettes against an orange sky, standing close together in a way I'd forgotten we ever had. He kept these separate from the family albums, almost as if preserving a version of our relationship that had been allowed to exist, only in secret, away from the gravitational pull of my mother's favoritism and Emily's endless needs. I cried over those photographs in a way I hadn't cried since reading his letter. My grief was not only for my father or what we'd lost, but also for what we'd never been able to build. Somewhere inside that passive, avoidant man was a father who loved me, saw me, and wanted more for us than stolen weekends and silent apologies. But he'd never found the courage to fight for it, and neither had I. Ethan discovered me on the deck that evening, the photos strewn across the worn table, tear tracks still visible on my cheeks. Tell me about them, he urged simply, sinking into the chair next me. I told him about the fishing lessons, the quiet chats, and how my father seemed different when we were alone. I told him about how those weekends ended when Emily began therapy and my mother proclaimed that we needed to be a unified family front, which meant no more special time for the daughter who wasn't struggling. Ethan listened without interrupting, without attempting to resolve anything, and without delivering cliches about forgiveness or closure. When I was finished, he picked up the photograph of us on the pier and studied it for a long time. Finally he stated, "This is what Margaret gets. This is the version of you that knows how to show up. The person who realized the true meaning of presence through absence. This was just what I needed to hear. Our daughter was born the next spring. We named Margaret after my grandma, who once attempted to be there for me even when she couldn't. When my mother learned about the baby, she made an effort to reconnect. Cards, emails, and even a phone call from my hospital that I declined to accept. Emily delivered a gift basket, which I donated to a women's shelter. Daniel only contacted me once, with a quick message in which he wished me well but made no apology or mention of anything we had discussed. I did not respond to any of it. Margaret's first birthday card arrived when she was 3 months old, addressed to baby Taylor Walker, as if my mother couldn't bring herself to acknowledge either my married name or the name change that had preceded it. Inside came a $350 check and a note written in my mother's meticulous script. Every youngster should know their granny. Please do not penalize her for our mistakes. I gave the money to a children's hospital and threw away the card. The irony of my mother imposing punishment was not lost on me. This was a lady who had spent my whole childhood punishing me for the crime of self-sufficiency, withholding attention, affection, and basic acknowledgement because I did not demand them loud enough. More cards appeared. Birthdays, holidays, and random Tuesdays when my mother evidently felt compelled to reach out. Each went unopened into a box in the back of my closet. A growing archive of too little, too late that I couldn't bring myself to delete. Ethan once asked me why I had kept them. I mentioned evidence, but I wasn't sure what I meant. Perhaps they tried. Evidence indicating their efforts were ineffective. Evidence that I wasn't dreaming the decades of neglect that had led to this arrangement, and that there was actually anything worth leaving behind. Perhaps I saved them because a small wounded part of me wanted to open one and find the words I'd waited my entire life to hear. Not, "We miss you, please forgive us," or, "Think of your daughter," but something more basic and fundamental. "We understand how we failed you. We understand why you've left. You were correct to defend yourself." Those words never arrived. When I eventually got the confidence to read them years later, each card had some variation on the same topic. Their anguish, uncertainty, and amazement over my cruelty. They never acknowledged their role in building the distance between us. They never showed any awareness of what they had done or why I might have needed to leave. Some would call it frigid and unforgiving. A psychiatrist I met briefly after my father died indicated that I was cutting off my nose despite my face, that I was torturing myself by refusing to reconcile. But she did not understand. Reconciliation necessitates acknowledgement. It is necessary for those who have wronged you to admit their actions. My family has never demonstrated that they realize the gravity of their betrayal. To them, I was still being dramatic about one graduation, carrying a petty grudge, and being unreasonable in a story where they were blameless victims of my unexplained cruelty. Walking away was not punishment. Rather, it was a form of protection. It was choosing myself after a lifetime of not being chosen. Margaret took her first steps in the beach home on the same pier where my father had taught me to fish. Ethan captured it on tape and I watched it over and over that night, amazed at this new existence we had built. This family that genuinely functioned as one. My mother died 4 years after my father, in a nursing home that I paid for surreptitiously through an attorney. I never visited, but I made certain she had good care, a private room, and all she needed. It was more than she'd done for me, and while it may seem petty, it felt right. She was still my mother, even though she had never been particularly good at it. Emily fought the beach house in probate following my mother's death, alleging our father was not in his right mind. The challenge failed terribly, and our relationship, such as it was, ended abruptly. I am now 44 years old, a department head at a big hospital, married to a beautiful man, and the mother of a girl who knows she is seen, cherished, and respected. My life is rich in ways I never believed possible as a lonely medical student longing for a family that never arrived. I sometimes wonder what would have occurred had I stayed. If I had buried my pride after graduation, accepted my invisibility, and continued to be the responsible daughter who demanded nothing and received nothing, would I have this career, marriage, and bone-deep contentment? I do not think so. I believe I would have shrunk smaller and smaller, attempting to fit into a space that was never meant to accommodate me. Until nothing remained but hatred and regret. Changing my name was the most rash decision I've ever made. It arose from hurt and resentment, as well as a frantic need to become someone who could not be abandoned by the Taylors because she no longer belonged to them. However, it evolved into something very different. It became licensed to create a life on my own terms. Permission to identify family via choice rather than blood. Permission to quit waiting for those who would never show up. My daughter recently asked me why she has a different surname than some of her cousins, Ethan's nieces and nephews. I told her the truth in ways a 9-year-old might understand. I once had a family that lost how to love me properly, and I needed to find someone who remembered. What if they learned how? She inquired with the genuine optimism of a child. What if they figured it out and invited you back? I considered that question for a long time before responding. Some lessons are too late, sweetie. Some doors, once closed, are designed to stay that way. Not because we're being unkind, but because opening them again would be too painful. She accepted this with the simple understanding that children sometimes possess. And I accepted it entirely, something I hadn't done until that point. They forgot about me on purpose. So I forgot about them immediately away. And in doing so, I discovered myself. That decision altered everything. It changed who I am, where I live, and who I report to. It transformed my understanding of family, belonging, and love. But most importantly, it altered my response to a question I had been asking my entire life without realizing it. What if I stopped waiting for those who would never select me? The solution turns out to be everything.